Welcome to Life Matters. I'm your host, Brendan O'Connell. Life Matters strives to produce informative shows that are timeless, no matter when the shows are aired throughout the Commonwealth of Massachusetts and beyond. Today's show is different. It's very time sensitive. Why? Because the draconian disregard and reckless actions of politicians on Beacon Hill, concomitant with the prodding of the complicit abortion industry. Right now, legislation is moving at lightning speed with virtually no deliberation on a bill before the end of the legislative session on July 31st. One of its goals is to nullify the 9-0 drubbing that Attorney General Martha Coakley suffered at the United States Supreme Court just this past June 26th in the case of McCullen versus Coakley, when your free speech had a momentous victory. I'll explore with today's guest the assertions of this hastily drafted proposed bill and its ramifications on Massachusetts, where about 16,000 babies in the womb were killed in 2012, right here in the Commonwealth. Well, welcome Bill Cotter and C.J. Doyle.
Thank you, Brendan.
Great to be here, Brendan.
C.J., let me ask you first, what is the proposed hastily crafted legislation all about?
Well, you should ask Bill because he has the most recently revised version of it.
Well, the bill, like all of these bills, the buffer zone bill and other various anti-pro-life bills, if you will, crafted under the guise of public safety, is in fact just a very straightforward attempt to push back, suppress the pro-life message. The abortion basically is founded on a lie, a denial of science, a denial of nature, that the child in the womb is in fact a child, and they insist that it is something else, some other species of tissue, or something that is less than human life and therefore is disposable. Mm-hmm. So once you see the world from that prism, and you regard the taking of that life, the removing and destruction of that life as not a crime, which it used to be, but a basic human right, which is what it's claimed as now, then, of course, those who oppose that are necessarily enemies of human rights. And that's where pro-lifers find themselves now. So whatever they can do to suppress us, to keep the message, what they would ultimately like to do, of course, is silence the message altogether. But absent the ability to do that, what they have attempted to do with a fair amount of success is to intimidate, marginalize, vilify, and increasingly with the force of law, push back through buffer zones and other type of legislation, people who have that message. So more and more there is simply this assent to the pro-abortion mantra that goes as a continual drumbeat through our society, aided very strongly by the media and just about every institution within our culture.
Mm-hmm. And how are pro-aborts like NARAL and Planned Parenthood trying to sell this legislation to the public?
Well, they're trying to sell it obviously as a public safety issue and prevent, so-called harassment. Look, they used the original John Salvi shooting 20 years ago as a kind of Reichstag fire to simply impede, impair, inhibit the civil liberties of their opponents. The reality is, Planned Parenthood and abortion clinic operators have a financial interest in this. They make money from this. They want to isolate women coming into their clinics from any influence that might deter them from going through with this hideous, gruesome procedure of abortion. They have a history of demonizing pro-lifers. And they have a very utilitarian view of when it comes to telling the truth. So what they did is, again, they used this Salvi shooting years ago to insist on the original buffer zone legislation. Now, this is a manifest absurdity. How can a painted line in a street, or in the case of the original buffer zone, an invisible line in the street, deter a mentally unstable gunman bent on homicide, or at least in the case of an abortion clinic, additional homicides? So this was always a fraud right from the get-go. So this is really now the third buffer zone bill in Massachusetts. We had the one going back to 1999, then they found that unworkable, the so-called floating buffer zone. Now they went in 2007 to the 35-foot fixed line, and now we're replacing basically a permanent mandatory 35-foot buffer zone with a temporary discretionary 25-foot buffer zone, the discretion being exercised by a single police officer who can decide. Now, Bill just informs us now with the revision in the bill, it used to be a group as small as 2 people. Now a single individual can be ordered away by the police for quote unquote substantially impeding access. But it's entirely in the discretion of a police officer. So there's no guarantee here against arbitrary and capricious behavior. It's entirely punitive. These draconian penalties. It smacks of retaliation against pro-lifers for having the temerity to vindicate their cause before the U.S. Supreme Court. And again, they're demonizing one entire class of citizens and treating them as threats to public order and enemies of public safety and as guilty of intimidation and harassment. And Bill can tell you much better than I can. It's pro-lifers who have been subject to harassment and verbal abuse and even assault over the years. You know?
Bill, let me ask you then, what is the dispersal clause in the bill, and what are its ramifications?
Well, the dispersal clause essentially, when the police have a report of somebody impeding entrance, what they term substantially impeding entrance, making it very, very difficult for somebody to get in by blocking the door or whatever. If somebody does that, then they can order that individual or group of individuals to disperse back behind a line which is marked on the street 25 feet from the property. Now the question comes in as to how honest they're going to be about and how vigilant they're going to be, how thorough they're going to be in terms of actually determining did that individual blockade the door, or was it simply, say, an anonymous phone call from some activist. I remember back several years ago when some pro-lifers were over at Planned Parenthood and there was a police detail there. The police got a call. We know this because we obtained the 911 tape as a Freedom of Information request, and we had the actual voice that was exchanged from the dispatcher and the police officer. Dispatcher says, there's trouble down there at 1055 Commonwealth Ave. A couple of the activists getting out of hand. They're doing. And this lurid description of the supposed misdeeds they were carrying out, and the officer said, "Well, look, I'm here. I'm looking at them right now. There's nothing going on." And she said, "Well, we've got this report. We just called in. It's getting out of hand. They're out of control." So you get these kind of reports that come in periodically, and a police may show up and say, "We heard you were doing this and this." Well, no, we didn't. So are they going to just take somebody's word for it anonymously, or are they going to have only act if they see you blocking the door, or if they have videotape from the clinic to look at to actually determine if somebody really did go to the door? So I don't know how capricious the police are going to be. They have not been really capricious or anything as far as the buffer zone goes. They haven't tried to nickel and dime us. So hopefully they'll have some standards as far as enforcing it. But there's, vagaries in this law here, and, just the whole thrust of the law and its timing and everything about it just smacks of spite and vindictiveness.
By the pro-abortionists.
Absolutely, yeah, and they're willing accomplices in the legislature. I shouldn't say accomplices because they're all in the, mostly on the same page anyway. So.
And is this the end of the right to assembly in Massachusetts? I mean, if with two, you can only
if you're a pro-lifer, everybody else can assemble.
Labor activists, the Occupy movement, environmentalists, everybody else will still be able to engage in behavior, even no matter how obnoxious it can be. Remember, the Occupy movement took over an entire portion of Dewey Square and set up tents. They literally occupied public property, and nothing was done about it. And here, pro-lifers get within a certain area, they're pushed back. It's just it's entirely selective. It's entirely punitive. It's entirely unfair. And of course, again, and the narrative is that pro-lifers are dangerous, that pro-lifers somehow are engaged in intimidation and harassment, pro-lifers are violent, and it's all a lie. I mean, this is all this is this is something of an Orwellian character in terms of its outrageous inversion of the truth.
In fact, I have an article here written in the Globe by Joanna Weiss. Court is naive on buffer zones. What do you make of that?
Well, I mean, here's a woman who said who wrote the stereotypical pro-lifer foaming at the mouth and screaming slurs. Now, if she wrote that about any other group, first of all, they wouldn't print it, but they'd fire her. It's overt, raw bigotry. And this is an example of what passes for the conventional wisdom among our societal elites. It's outrageous. Again, they've spent years. Planned Parenthood has a vested financial interest in demonizing pro-lifers and in coming up with this narrative. And Bill, didn't you say the other day in your testimony they actually had a Planned Parenthood activist who admitted sending in agents provocateur to discredit pro-lifers?
Well, she was not a Planned Parenthood activist. It was her name was Joan Appleton. She used to run, registered nurse, ran a clinic in Virginia, abortion clinic, some years ago. And when there were rescues and demonstrations there at the clinic, she had standing by several pro-abortion activists and women who would come before the cameras, who were there, covering the event for the news, and give their testimony to that I was a patient. I tried to get in. They did this to me. I was knocked down. I was called names and so on. And she came here up in 1998 or 9, whenever we had the hearings for the initial version of the buffer zone, and she testified. Once again to no avail. I mean, these testimonies, these hearings before these committees, somewhat remind me of the show trials of the Soviet Union. You bring in all these experts, and you bring in women who, were going to the other. We had a woman yesterday who was there from Worcester, who was coming down the sidewalk, Chandler Street, and heading to Planned Parenthood in Worcester with an appointment for an abortion. She met a sidewalk counselor. She ended up changing her mind. She has a baby, who's 5 years old now, and she's glad about it. Thanks, the pro-lifers, was grateful for being well treated by them and so forth. We have, Rod Murphy there runs Problem Pregnancy. The pregnancy counselors were there. We had sidewalk counselors telling about, their story, and what they know about women who've had abortions and all this, stuff. And we have, as I mentioned to them, the violence is really going, towards us. And I said, and we can document that. We've had the people who have assaulted us, we've taken to court, we've prosecuted.
So the pro-aborts are really assaulting the pro-lifers in reality, is what's going on.
Well, mostly it's from two sources. It's, passers-by who, throw things out the window at you, or, swerve their car toward you, or somebody comes down the street and, attacks a pro-lifer, or maybe there's a, boyfriend or something of someone going into the clinic. It's pretty rare that you have somebody, say works in the clinic, assault a pro-lifer, but that has happened. We had that, security guard over in Brookline arrested and, ordered away from the clinic. He had to surrender his weapons. So, we can document the violence that's been done to us. And not only that, but, we successfully prosecuted it under existing law. We didn't have to go to the legislature and, carve out some special, pro-life rights bill or something. And that's our contention here, is that if all these things that they claim are happening, they should have, hours of videotape that they can bring it. They haven't brought out 1 minute worth, of all, and they have video cameras all around Planned Parenthood in Boston. They have it at the front door, they have it at the back door, they have up, up on the height of the building, on the four corners of the building. And how many times have you seen on the TV news, or you look on YouTube or whatever, you'll see video of some robbery or attempted robbery at a convenience store, gas station, shooting or whatever. The security cameras pick it up, and it's so if they have,
it's on the evening news.
And the assaults against us are relatively infrequent, but they're claiming that it's going on by the hour over there. In fact, the buffer zone has only been defeated now, I think, like 2 weeks, and the police have been out there every day, and we're supposed to believe that the police are either complicit or ignorant or blind or something. They have arrested nobody. They've threatened nobody with arrest. There's no videotape of all this, outrageous behavior going on, and yet that's the narrative they bring to the State House, and it's just presumed to be true. And we, and when they hear Eleanor McCullen testify, they say, well, you're obviously a very sincere woman, but the implication is you're the anomaly. There's the other, the bad actors who were there, but
that's how the pro-aborts try to portray it.
Absolutely. But also, if you listen to
how can they get away with unfounded claims and hysteria?
Well, because they're singing the song of the, you have their counterparts in the legislature who
And the
believe the
media.
same thing in the media. So they're all, reciting the same creed. But if you listen, to the testimony of some of them, despite their claims that, which almost sounds ludicrous, that this bill is not about abortion, it's about public safety. But you listen to many of the testimonies by the pro-abortion people. It's they talk about, one talked about feeling this dreadful sense of being sickened or traumatized or something by this old man coming down the sidewalk. It was a Good Friday, and they brought this wooden cross. They were having Stations of the Cross over there. Or one of them commented derisively about the professionally made signs that showed a portrait of a young child and said, "I was conceived and raped," and on the sign, "I do not deserve to die." A perfectly legitimate pro-life slogan, if you will. Or other signs that show, and if it's a sign with an aborted baby, well then that's characterized as a fake picture. So, over and over again, there's no good pro-life argument, picture, slogan, data, anything and everything that we
According
offer,
to the pro-abortion.
according to them,
Everything is
According to-
is
unacceptable.
put in the most
According-
pejorative light. And so therefore it becomes part and parcel of our criminal behavior, because any utterance we could make, constitutes, in their view, harassment, intimidation. You're making me feel bad. It never, the feeling bad on the part of anybody on the other side, or any client or anything, is never assigned to the dreadful and traumatizing act of abortion itself, despite women's own testimony after the fact who've had abortions. It's all attributed only to the pro-lifers. The pro-lifers are the problem, the villain, and must be eliminated by whatever means are at our disposal.
So now Deval Patrick has been pushing this big time. He's our current governor, and he used to sit on the board of Planned Parenthood 10 or 12 years ago. Shouldn't the public know about that?
Yeah. And Martha Coakley
They
is, of course,
should,
fanatical about
but
this
unfortunately
issue.
the public doesn't care much. And that's the real root of your problem.
Let me ask you this, CJ. Does the public know that Marty Walls, the former state rep from the Beacon Hill area, drafted the former 35-foot buffer zone? And now she's working and making $250,000 at Planned Parenthood?
Yeah, they certainly have far more resources than the pro-life movement has. We should mention, Brendan, by the way, to your viewers, that this is being rushed through the legislature so quickly that this could actually be passed by the time you see the show. But if it has not been passed, it's still very, very important that you call your state representative and speak out against this, this dreadfully punitive, unfair, unwarranted, misdirected piece of legislation. And if you go to our website, thecatholicactionleague.org, you can get links to the telephone numbers of both House members and of Senate members. So again, it's catholicactionleague.org. I should also point out exactly what's going on in terms of abuse of process. This bill, which is basically the third buffer zone bill in 15 years, this bill, by the way, you would think a 9-0 Supreme Court decision would have a chastening effect on the Massachusetts political class, but that's obviously an unreasonable assumption here. This bill was filed late in the day on the 14th of July, Monday. The text of it wasn't available until Tuesday publicly on the 15th of July. Then a public hearing was held on Wednesday, the 16th of July, and apparently before the scheduled end of the public to go to 6 p.m., they had managed to report it out of 2 committees favorably, run it through 3 readings in the Senate, and have it passed to be engrossed by the Massachusetts Senate. Now, this really is something that that even the old Supreme Soviet would be reluctant to act in this way. This is absolutely an abuse of the democratic process. It's an abuse of the Constitution. It's abuse of the rules of the House and the Senate. So you should also be upset not only with the content of this bill, but the manner in which it's being stampeded, railroaded, and rushed through. And you should let your state representative know that this is you're outraged by this. And by the way, they also have, in addition to our website that has the link for their individual phone numbers and for their email addresses, you also have the main phone number of the House of Representatives, which is 617-722-2000, 617-722-2000. Call them and ask to speak to your state representative and tell them you're outraged by the content of this bill, which is, again, entirely misdirected. It's pro-lifers who are the victims here. And I think, as Bill has pointed out in the past, they were the ones that the Supreme Court found were deprived of their rights. Instead of being treated treated as victims, they're being treated as aggressors. This is a case of really, again, an Orwellian inversion of reality based upon the interest, the financial and the ideological interest of the abortion industry, which apparently has completely captured our elected representatives. So it's very, very sad. But both the content of the bill is objectionable, and the whole process by which, again, it's being stampeded through is something that, well, where are the good government groups, by the way? Where's Common Cause and all these other groups that normally speak out against any kind of abuse or unethical behavior or improper behavior in terms of the democratic process? Why aren't they speaking out about, imagine a bill within a few hours goes from a public hearing to 2 committee reports, 3 readings, and passage by one of the 2 branches. It's outrageous.
Now
Massachusetts may be part of the United States legally, but politically we're a third world country.
Now, you had spent time early in your career working on Beacon Hill, didn't you?
I have no illusions about how bad they can be at times, but this is really a new depth. This is really a new low. I've never seen anything like this before.
Now, I know that Jim Lyons and some others actually tried to, I think Mark Lombardo tried to pass or get some type of legislation or talk about chastening of this Marty Walls, that, you know, here she is, she was the author of the 35-foot buffer zone that has been voted out by the Supreme Court,
right,
and she's now profiting in the abortion industry. Can't we do something about that as citizens? I mean, isn't there a law that...
Chapter 268 of the General Laws of the Commonwealth says you can't act as an agent for someone other than the Commonwealth. So I suppose, but that would be up to the State Ethics Commission or the Attorney General's office, both of whom are probably ideologically far more in tune with Marty Waltz than the other side. You know?
Yeah, the Ethics Committee that Jim and Mr. Lombardo submitted that observation to and rejected it. So nothing will be done.
Is this, well, first of all, Martha Coakley, is she doing this for gubernatorial reasons because she's running for governor in a few months, or she's running now,
I suppose in her mind it doesn't hurt.
It's to save face from that drubbing that she took of 9-0?
Well, I think also she has a history of being extremely fanatical on this issue. So, I mean, you know, it would be normal to ascribe political motives to a person in Massachusetts politics, but in this case, I think it isn't just political with Martha Coakley. I think she's heavily invested on one side in this issue, and it seems to be quite personal. Remember, she actually said, let's not get mad, let's get even. And if you look at these draconian penalties, including a $10,000 civil penalty for the first offense, that's certainly getting even. The question is, who is she getting even with? Eleanor McCullen? I mean, my God, you know, this woman is a fanatic when it comes to it. Remember, Martha Coakley also said a year ago when we talked about conscience clauses for people who are pro-life, she said, if you're Catholic or pro-life, you really shouldn't work in a hospital emergency room. So this is not someone that has a deep commitment to the constitutional right to freedom of speech or freedom of religion.
Can I ask you, do you think that this legislation is more unconstitutional than what the Supreme Court just struck down 9-0?
Well, I don't know how you can be more unconstitutional. But you know, I mean, the other one was an absolute ban that applied to everybody. This one is an ad hoc ban that applies temporarily to people selected by a given policeman. So, you know, on the face of it, it would seem to be, you know, something that would be at least probably not as frequently in effect, you know, not usually in effect in the sense that most of the time, hopefully, we're not going to be banished behind the line. But, so I guess the answer is no to your question, but that, you know, it's still not acceptable.
We should also point out that we owe this in some way to Chief Justice Roberts, who could have gone with the 4 justices who said this was unconstitutional root and branch, and instead went with the 4 more liberal justices who said that it wasn't narrowly tailored enough. So this, of course, gave the opening for them to come back with another piece of legislation. So thank you again, Chief Justice Roberts, for this.
Well, we've kind of come to the end of our show here. I mean, I
tell them to call the legislature again, then.
Call the
Brendan.
legislature. We get that number up on the screen as I let you know, folks, that I hope you found today's show to be the unfettered truth, and moreover, that it compels you to take action, to call these legislatures not to vote for the bill number.
It's the, what's the bill number, my God? 2281, I think?
2281.
Senate opposed Senate 2281, the new buffer zone law. Main number of the House 617-722-2000, 617-722-2000, or go to the CatholicActionLeague.org website and get the link to the phone numbers and email addresses of your state rep.
Well, thank you, Bill, for coming in, and CJ for coming all the way from where you live here in
Thank you, Brendan.
locally. And thanks for watching, folks. We hope you found today's show to be unique, informative, content-rich, truthful, and thought-provoking. We'll see you next week. Hello, welcome to Life Matters. I'm your host, Brendan O'Connell. Well, today's guest is a mother of 4 children and founder and director of Northern Ireland's leading pro-life group. In 1997, she founded Precious Life after viewing a picture of a baby killed by abortion. Well, welcome, Mrs. Bernadette Smith.
Thank you, Brendan. I'm delighted to speak to you from Ireland. As a voice for the unborn child, and I know many of the listeners will be in agreement that this is a worldwide struggle and we have to unite. And I'm here to tell you about the threat to Ireland to legalise abortion.
Bernadette, can you give us a little bit of the history between Ireland, England, Northern Ireland? What's gone on and what are some significant... Hello, welcome to Life Matters. I'm your host, Brendan O'Connell. Well, one of the true icons of the pro-life movement, Miss Nellie Gray, passed away in 2012. And they searched around for someone who could fill her shoes, and we think we found that person. Her name is Jeannie Monahan. Well, welcome, Jeannie.
Oh, thanks for having me.
Jeannie, could you please speak first to the legacy that Nellie Gray left regarding the Right to Life movement and the March for Life, which is really an enormous event down in Washington, D.C.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, on that, just on your final note there, the March for Life is the largest pro-life event in the world that we know of, and we think it's the largest civil rights.
Well, welcome, Mr. James Sedlak.
Well, Brendan, it's great to be here. Thank you for having me on.
Mr. Sedlak, could you give your assessment of the most recent Planned Parenthood annual report that came out a week or two ago?
Absolutely. What this report shows, the one that came out last week, is that in 2011, 2012, Planned Parenthood had a total income of $1.2 billion. I'll repeat that again. That's $1.2 billion with a B.